Welcome to our channel. Today we celebrate the incredible life and career of Pam Grier, a trailblazing actress and cultural icon whose journey from hardship to Hollywood stardom is nothing short of inspiring. Best known for her powerful roles in groundbreaking films like Coffee and Foxy Brown, Grier redefined the image of women in action cinema. From her early struggles to her triumphs on the big screen, her story is one of resilience, courage, and unwavering determination. Join us as we explore the life, legacy, and lasting impact of Pam Grier. Pam Grier was born on May 26, 1949, in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, not Massachusetts, as is sometimes mistakenly reported, and she grew up in what seemed like a fairly typical family setting. Her father served in the Air Force, which meant that the Grier family often moved, including a brief stint in England, before eventually settling in Denver, Colorado. Young Pam found solace in Denver's sprawling parks, developing a love of the outdoors that would shape her entire life. She fished, rode horses, and learned to appreciate nature's capacity for renewal. In many ways, her childhood was as picturesque as anyone's, until a devastating event shattered her innocence. When she was just 6 years old, a group of boys assaulted her in her own neighborhood, holding her down and violating her. A nearby telephone repairman happened to see the attack and ran toward them, scaring the boys off before they could do anything worse. Pam was safe from further violence, but as she would later acknowledge, the damage to her psyche had already been done. Not wanting to spark a cycle of vengeance or tear her family apart, she decided not to share what had happened. Consequently, she grappled with a deep sense of shame and self-consciousness. She stopped talking for periods of time, and when she did speak, she realized she had developed a stutter. Her trauma was written into her body, manifesting in a suddenly shaky voice. Despite that horrendous beginning, Pam Grier grew into a smart, resilient teenager who tried to build a future for herself along more conventional lines. She enrolled in Metropolitan State College in Denver, intending to become a doctor. She also entered local beauty contests for extra money, competing in pageants like Miss Colorado Universe. Though she only placed as runner-up, it was there that a Hollywood agent spotted her. He insisted she had star quality and tried to sign her on the spot. At first, she brushed him off, focusing on her education and telling herself that a Hollywood career seemed far-fetched. But that business card lingered in her wallet. Something inside her recognized she might need it one day. While Pam continued college, tragedy struck again in her personal life. She was the victim of date rape at age 18. Already scarred by her childhood assault, she fell into an even deeper struggle with her self-image. She began dressing down, hoping that if she disguised her figure and made herself look less attractive, she wouldn't be targeted again. And when she opened up about the assault to her boyfriend, he responded with disturbing cruelty, telling her she was tainted. Feeling betrayed and isolated, she hid her suffering and simply tried to survive, believing that no one else could really help her. After that, she drew closer to her own sense of strength, vowing that she would not allow the violence of others to define her future. In 1967, Pam Grier used the agent's business card to find an opportunity in Los Angeles. Once she arrived, her first gigs in Hollywood were decidedly unglamorous. She worked as a receptionist and switchboard operator, even lying during the interview by claiming she already knew how to operate the complicated switchboard system. Of course, she taught herself on the fly, highlighting that fierce resourcefulness she'd been cultivating for years. She also managed to nab a tiny background role in the film Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, a campy sex and rock and roll romp directed by Russ Meyer. Though it wasn't a starring part, it got Pam comfortable on a set and allowed her to observe how the film industry functioned. Everything changed when a well-known B-movie director, Jack Hill, noticed her around the office. Jack Hill had a knack for discovering talent for exploitation films, which were churning out serious box office numbers in niche markets. Immediately seeing Grier's potential, he convinced her to audition for The Big Doll House, a women in prison exploitation feature that would be shot mostly in the Philippines. She landed a lead role, and suddenly the switchboard was in her rearview mirror. At just around 20 years old, Pam flew out to the Philippines and threw herself into the rigors of a 16-hour-day shoot. Between the oppressive heat, punishing schedules, and a shoestring budget, it was a trial by fire. Far from complaining, Pam Grier seemed to thrive on it, forging real bonds with fellow cast members and proving she had a work ethic like no one else. The film was a surprise hit and kicked off a cycle of exploitation flicks featuring Grier. Over a period of about 2 years, she starred in 5 of these movies, including Women in Cages, The Big Bird Cage, and others helmed by Jack Hill. Audiences saw her as an exciting new presence, a black woman with a striking screen persona, a fierce sense of independence, and action star physicality. She could wield a gun, throw a punch, and still look fabulous in her flamboyant 1970s outfits. This put her on track for one of the most significant roles of her early career. Coffee. Released in 1973, Coffee elevated Pam Grier from a rising B-movie actress to a genuine star of the blaxploitation genre. She portrayed a nurse on a mission of violent revenge, out to take down the drug dealers who had hooked her younger sister. The film positioned Grier as both an avenging angel and a compassionate caretaker, an unusual combination that showcased her range. Coffee catapulted her to an entirely new level of fame and earned widespread applause from black audiences hungry for a heroine who could match or surpass the swagger of male action heroes. Grier had the presence, the attitude, and the skill to carry the film entirely on her shoulders. Notably, Coffee also featured a memorable moment where Grier's character stashed a gun in her voluminous afro, a detail Pam came up with herself. This small bit of ingenuity became an iconic cinematic image, celebrated by fans of exploitation cinema and recognized as a groundbreaking representation of black female strength on screen. She followed Coffee with Foxy Brown, another major success in 1974. Although critics slammed it for glorifying violence and leaning on sleazy tropes, audiences loved it, and it cemented Pam's position as the reigning queen of the blaxploitation era. A brand new image of the independent black woman emerged in popular culture, fierce, stylish, unafraid to tackle injustice, and unstoppable when fueled by righteous anger. Pam Grier was front and center as that icon. Fame also brought relationships with high-profile men. One of her early romances came when she was still fairly new to L.A. She caught the attention of rising basketball star Lou Alcindor, who later converted to Islam and changed his name to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. They both loved martial arts films, bonding over repeated viewings of Seven Samurai, but it didn't last. In a move that sounds astonishing even in Hollywood's colorful dating world, Abdul-Jabbar presented her with an ultimatum on her 21st birthday: convert to Islam by 2 p.m. that very day, or he would marry another woman who was already prepared to wed him if Pam said no. Grier declined, uninterested in making such a major decision under pressure. So Abdul-Jabbar married the other woman that afternoon. While the abrupt end must have stung, it wouldn't be the last time Pam encountered dramatic twists in her personal life. Soon after, Pam had a relationship with comedian Freddie Prinze, the father of actor Freddie Prinze Jr. They met when Grier was promoting Coffee, and he was starring in Chico and The Man. While they talked about the possibility of marriage, his severe struggles with addiction and depression loomed overhead. Their romance ended, but they stayed in contact, with Grier's doing her best to help him pull out of his downward spiral. Tragically, it wasn't enough. Freddie Prinze died by suicide in 1977, and Pam was devastated to learn that she had been one of the last people to speak with him. She had tried her best, but ultimately realized that his mental health issues were beyond anything she could rescue him from. Another high-profile figure soon came into Pam's orbit, legendary comedian Richard Pryor. Freddie Prinze had introduced them before his passing, but it was when Pam starred alongside Pryor in Greased Lightning that their relationship blossomed. On the surface, they made a glamorous couple, but Pryor's battles with cocaine addiction, self-destructive behavior, and depression nearly overpowered any sense of stability. Nonetheless, Pam admired his comedic genius and tried to build him up, tutoring him so he could read lines more fluidly. He had grown up with limited literacy skills and encouraging him to have confidence in his abilities. She certainly had emotional strength to spare, but Pryor's addiction was a formidable opponent. The turning point came when Pam went to a doctor's appointment and discovered that traces of cocaine had been found in her private areas. Stunned, she realized Pryor must have applied the drug to himself before they were intimate. When she confronted him about it, he refused to change his behavior or use protection. The final blow was his affair with another woman whom he impregnated and then married, all while Pam believed they were still together. Although they eventually tried to reconnect as friends, during his recovery process, she could no longer shoulder the burden of being his sole caretaker and emotional safety net. When Pryor infamously set himself on fire while high in 1980, Pam refused to rush to his hospital bedside. As the popularity of blaxploitation films waned by the late 1970s, Pam Grier found her career in a precarious position. She wanted to move beyond exploitation roles and earn recognition in mainstream cinema. She secured a role in Fort Apache, The Bronx, starring Paul Newman, and made such an impression during the audition. She spent days on the streets researching sex workers, foregoing showers, brushing her teeth minimally, and immersing herself in the gritty environment that Paul Newman gave her a standing ovation. Yet the film's producers ended up casting another actress. Rejections like these stung, but Grier persisted, taking supporting roles in everything from action flicks like Above the Law with Steven Seagal to appearances in The Twilight People, Scream Blackula, Scream, Drum, and Bucktown. Hollywood didn't quite know what to do with a black female action star whose brand had been forged in the exploitation circuit, and the path to lead roles in major studio projects was filled with obstacles. Then an even more urgent crisis appeared in her life. In 1988, doctors diagnosed Pam with stage 4 cervical cancer, suggesting she might only have 18 months left to live. They recommended she start drafting her will, but Grier refused to accept this dire prognosis without a fight. She retreated to her ranch in Colorado, immersing herself in the familiar solace of nature. She embraced yoga, healthy eating, fresh air, and rest. Remarkably, she went into remission. She believed her childhood love for the outdoors, as well as her spiritual resilience, had given her the grounding she needed to make it through this life-threatening ordeal. However, her boyfriend at the time demonstrated staggering insensitivity by promising to accompany her through chemo sessions and then vanishing from her life entirely. Grier has recalled that she didn't see him again for 5 years. Rather than let that heartbreak crush her, she focused on her newly leased life, pouring her energy into recovery and self-love. By the early 1990s, Pam Grier was still doing smaller roles and TV guest spots to stay afloat financially and creatively. That's when destiny knocked again. A young Quentin Tarantino was preparing a film called Pulp Fiction. Grier auditioned for a role, but Tarantino decided she didn't quite fit the shy character he had in mind. However, he was a lifelong fan of her exploitation work. He had posters from her Coffee and Foxy Brown era all over his office walls, and told her he wanted to collaborate on something else down the line. That something else turned out to be Jackie Brown, his 1997 homage to the blaxploitation genre and to the cool, gutsy vibe Pam Grier exuded in her early career. He specifically changed Elmore Leonard's original character, who was written as a white woman named Jackie Burke, into a black woman named Jackie Brown, all for the sake of casting Grier. When she showed up to his office and saw her old movie posters, she assumed he'd put them up to flatter her, not realizing he'd displayed them for years because he was genuinely that big of a fan. Jackie Brown became a hit, critically acclaimed for its stylish direction and for Pam Grier's smoldering performance as an older, wiser flight attendant caught up in a criminal conspiracy. Critics and fans lauded her turn as a middle-aged woman who was still every bit as compelling as the 20-something Avenger she'd once played. She received a Golden Globe nomination and a Screen Actors Guild nomination, proving that her talents extended well beyond the world of B-movies. For many viewers, it felt like a comeback, although Pam herself felt she never really left. She simply took whatever work she could find and kept her head above water. Jackie Brown reminded the industry what an asset Pam Grier could be. In the wake of that success, Grier started dating Kevin Evans, an RCA Records executive who was 13 years her junior. She had long since stopped believing that society's rules about age or tradition had to apply to her own life. They seemed happy together, even appearing on a magazine cover and discussing the possibility of having children. As time went on, her post-Jackie Brown career was healthy. She began taking on a range of projects, from an appearance in Tim Burton's offbeat alien invasion comedy Mars Attacks, to a recurring role as Kit Porter on the Showtime series The L Word, which explored the lives of several queer women in Los Angeles. Although Grier's character was a straight woman in a group of lesbian friends, the show broke ground in LGBTQ representation, and Pam brought both warmth and a world-weary sense of wisdom to her role. She also did voiceover work, popped up on hit shows like Law & Order, SVU, Smallville, where she portrayed the villainous Amanda Waller, and more. She turned up in movies like Bones alongside Snoop Dogg, in Jawbreaker, and in Snow Day, proving her ability to handle a wide range of genres, from horror to teen comedy to family entertainment. Looking back at her storied history, Pam decided in 2010 to write her memoir, Foxy, My Life in 3 Acts. In it, she divulged the details of her childhood trauma, the confusion and shame she felt after the attack, her relationships with men like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Freddie Prinze, and Richard Pryor, and her experiences navigating an industry that often fetishized her but rarely valued her intellect. She also revisited the blaxploitation era that first brought her fame. While some critics in the 1970s and beyond dismissed or scorned these films for their violence, gritty sensibilities, and sexual content, Grier argued that they captured a reality she had seen in her own life. She saw hypocrisy in the fact that audiences accepted or even praised violence when it involved white male protagonists, but moralized against it when it was a black woman taking center stage. She pointed out that these movies offered her a path to stardom that mainstream Hollywood hadn't been willing to provide. The conversation around blaxploitation is still ongoing. Historians and cultural commentators note the negative stereotypes, but also acknowledge the emergence of powerful black lead characters who subverted the usual Hollywood formulas. Pam Grier stood at that crossroads, embodying both the controversies and the groundbreaking possibilities of the genre. In her memoir, Grier also revealed that she'd faced lecherous behavior from more than one male celebrity. She recalled an incident at a party where Sammy Davis Jr. propositioned her openly in front of his wife to the point where she felt uncomfortable. Fortunately, she had an ally in Liza Minnelli, who helped her sidestep the unwelcome advances. Grier credits her longtime agent, John Gaines, for protecting her as much as he could, following her to parties, and ensuring she wouldn't be cornered by producers or executives who had less than professional intentions. Such experiences made her acutely aware of how precarious it could be for a woman in Hollywood, especially one who was young, beautiful, and trying to build a real career rather than simply function as window dressing in other people's projects. After surviving cancer and heartbreak, Pam Grier continued to embrace her independent spirit, moving forward with new creative ventures. She returned to the stage in 2010 and beyond, exploring live theater as another medium in which to sharpen her acting chops. She also nurtured her lifelong love of nature by spending most of her time at her ranch in Colorado, where she cares for horses and immerses herself in the environment that has always provided her with a sense of peace. That same year, she expressed interest in developing a film adaptation of her own life story. Jay Farrow, the comedian known for his stint on Saturday Night Live, has been rumored to portray Richard Pryor, the most chaotic of Pam's past loves, if the project ever makes it to production. Grier has joked that her life has been wilder than any script, so it might be a challenge to cram it all into a 2-hour film. She has remained steadfast about never actually marrying, despite her high-profile relationships. While she's spoken of being deeply in love multiple times, she ultimately decided that her own sense of self had to come before any partnership, especially given the tumultuous nature of her past romances. She's talked about the importance of learning to love herself more than she loves an idea of someone else, a lesson gleaned from heartbreak and from repeatedly bearing witness to addiction's destructive power in the lives of men she cared for. Furthermore, she has often said she doesn't need a marriage certificate or a wedding ring to feel complete. Her independence is paramount. Fans often call her the first female action star, a label director Quentin Tarantino helped popularize. That's a bold statement in a film history that includes earlier trailblazers in action or adventurous roles. Still, many historians and critics feel that Grier was indeed the first black female star to headline action-driven films consistently and be celebrated for it. The images of her wielding shotguns and outsmarting bad guys defined a new era of possibility. She gave legitimacy to the idea that female action leads were just as bankable as men, provided they had the right blend of authenticity, style, and sheer presence. Her success in Coffee and Foxy Brown paved the way for later generations of actresses who wanted to dabble in the kind of roles once reserved only for men. In an era dominated by Pam's male contemporaries, actors like Jim Brown, Fred Williamson, and Richard Roundtree, she stood out, not just as the token female lead, but as a headlining star with a distinct persona of her own. Today, Pam Grier's legacy is complicated and fascinating. She remains a cherished figure among cinephiles who see her as an emblem of empowerment, and she's often discussed in academic circles examining 1970s film and the shifting representation of race and gender on screen. She's been the subject of documentary segments, essays, and think pieces, all grappling with the contradictions of how the exploitation genre both exploited women and, paradoxically, gave them a platform to shine in leading roles. Grier herself never shies away from those contradictions. She acknowledges that those films were made on tight budgets, sometimes focused heavily on nudity or violence to draw an audience, but also provided a chance to portray a black woman hero who took matters into her own hands. Beyond her film work, Pam has engaged in community outreach and activism, especially when it comes to cancer awareness, women's health, and the support of sexual assault survivors. Having endured 2 instances of sexual violence herself and fought through a life-threatening illness, she often speaks publicly about resilience, sharing her own story to encourage others to seek help and support. Despite her occasional portrayal in the media as an untouchable icon of cool, Grier has always shown vulnerability and humility when discussing these personal hardships. She believes her rural, outdoorsy upbringing in Colorado gave her a lifelong sense of groundedness, reminding her that there is life beyond Hollywood's bright lights. In later years, Pam Grier also found success on television, with roles that ranged from comedic to dramatic. She had a memorable part in the sitcom Night Court in the mid-1980s. More recently, you might have seen her pop up in Just Right, a romantic comedy starring Queen Latifah, or providing a bit of star power in other ensemble films. She has also made voice cameos in animated shows, and her face remains iconic enough that references to her are sprinkled across pop culture. One of the consistent through lines in her career is that she never gave up her autonomy. She has told stories of turning down roles that felt demeaning or uninteresting. For her, it was never about simply cashing in on her looks or settling for any exploitative scenario. She might have started in exploitation films, but she did so on her own terms, bringing a spirit of confidence and authenticity that left a permanent mark on American cinema. As for marriage, Pam Grier has addressed the question many times over the decades. People often ask her how she managed to date all these men, some of them quite famous, and never end up a wife. Grier usually laughs it off, pointing out that she's seen enough pain and betrayal to know that formalizing a relationship on paper doesn't guarantee a happy ending. It's not that she's cynical. If anything, she's refreshingly honest in a business that thrives on image and illusions. She says her life is richer for having loved deeply, even if those relationships ended painfully. And she's always chosen to keep forging ahead on her own path. She's made guest appearances in shows like Bless This Mess, adding comedic flair and reminding everyone that her timing is impeccable. She continues to field offers for cameo roles, where her presence carries an automatic weight of nostalgia and cultural importance. Fans are always eager to see how she'll pop up next, and she's content to remain unpredictable. Grier's name frequently appears in discussions of Hollywood's overlooked talents. Many wonder why she hasn't received an honorary Oscar or some other lifetime achievement recognition for her pioneering work. When asked about regrets, Pam often indicates she doesn't really believe in them, because each mistake or heartbreak taught her an important lesson. She's been open about how she's handled the lingering trauma of sexual assault and how she learned to build healthy boundaries. She's a firm believer in therapy, mindfulness, and a willingness to be vulnerable. As tough as she appears on screen, she's equally candid about the fragility that underlies much of her strength. That duality, toughness, and vulnerability has always been at the core of her star power. She also remains politically and socially active, voicing support for environmental causes like protecting natural habitats in Colorado and championing animal welfare. Those who visit her home in Denver speak of a woman who feeds rescued horses, dogs, and cats, who still rides out at dawn, who might spend the afternoon fishing in a nearby stream. That same woman can then hop on a plane to Los Angeles if Tarantino or another director calls with an intriguing project. Whether it's a cameo appearance or a starring role, Pam always brings her signature mix of grace, no-nonsense grit, and playful humor. Pam Grier's life is a testament to strength, perseverance, and the ability to break barriers in Hollywood and beyond. From her iconic roles in the 1970s to her enduring influence on modern cinema, Grier has left an indelible mark on the industry and in the hearts of her fans. Her story reminds us that adversity can lead to triumph and that every challenge holds the seed of opportunity. If you were inspired by this look into Pam Grier's life, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories about iconic figures. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.